So by now, we've probably all seen the images. Or the image of the RuPaul opening to the Olympics. And of course, along with that has come some outrage, particularly from the so-called Christian religious right. And I wanted to comment on that because I'm personally finding this a little amusing. So it would seem that Christian sensibilities have been offended by, what happened with this whole weird, drag queen show that was supposed to sort of look like The Last Supper. And the reason why I wanted to comment on this and why I find it slightly amusing is that for decades, Muslims have been hearing from that specific community, right? From the conservative political action Christian right. In fact, their talking points and their selling points to the constituency is the threat of Islam and the threat of Muslims and the threat of Sharia law. And yet it's one of your own folks that is now actually the threat to your civilization. And so I think it's really quite it's a little bit amusing and quite ironic that the threat to Western civilization is not Islam. Never has been. The threat to Western civilization has never been Islam. And it's actually other Westerners. And so France hired this, what appears to be a young Jewish homosexual guy that decided to make a mockery of the Last Supper. And this has caused some outrage on Twitter, in other spaces. And so I had actually written something on my Twitter the other day, I think yesterday in fact. And it's interesting that it got quite a bit of response from other Christians. And so I'll actually just read here what I wrote. So I said, many Christian conservatives are shocked and outraged by France's ungodly and anti-godly Olympics, their ungodly Olympic opener, But this is what you've all been supporting all along with your anti-Islam rhetoric. Do you think this tide of hedonistic atheism would pass you by? You reap what you sow. And so what I meant by this is that by the body of the Christian right being led around by the nose by their political taskmasters and making much ado about nothing out of the threat of Islam, they have failed to address the elephant in the room, which is the ascendancy of Western hedonism, the ascendancy of not only anti-religion, but in particular a malevolent reaction towards Christianity. And so I find it quite ironic that how we were always scapegoated as the problem and the greatest threat to the West and the greatest threat to Islam, and they hate us for our freedoms and they hate us for our values and such and such. No, actually, it's you guys. And in fact, maybe I can even try to bring it up here to where I don't know if you'll be able to see it, from my phone. It's probably too bright. But I'm sure by now you've probably seen this image of the drag queen Last Supper. Maybe I can even, let's see if I can pull it up here for you to see. It's really unbelievable. It's embarrassing, and obviously it makes a mockery of Jesus, the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I just find it ironic that it was really, here I'll put it here for you guys so you can see on the IG, on the YouTube. Let me see if I can also stick it here for you guys on Instagram. Yeah, that should work. It'll be really small, but I can put it here for you guys to see. Obviously the part of the image that's there, part of the image that's the one on top is the drag queen show, and then the one is the painting depicting the Last Supper. And so again, you've had this outrage from the Christian right. They're making a mockery of our religion. Well, you've also tended to make a mockery virtually of every other religion. And there's been also a mean-spiritedness that has emerged out of Western American conservative Christian conservative American Christianity. There's a malevolence that's emerged out of it. Now, wanting to refute and rebuff certain behaviors or certain ideas that are reprehensible, like transgenderism or whatever that it is, fine. You can do that, but I really feel like there has emerged from it. They've done it with a level of malevolence, and that has then, in my opinion, invited this equally malevolent response from the hedonistic atheists, because I don't think it's only just putting it as atheism. It's also like a kind of hedonism that's responded, to that. And so, they've made and they've tried to, it really shows that all of that focus, all of that energy to focus on the Muslims as your problem really comes to show, one, that a lot of your, I wouldn't say necessarily your faith, but the way that you embody your faith and practice your faith has been filled with a lot of hate. And so, ironically, claiming that Sharia would be a threat is that Sharia would be actually the one, it would be, I wouldn't say the one, because there may be some other systems, but it's certainly a system of rule that would accommodate Christians to practice their religion. Now, nobody misunderstand what I'm saying here. Islam, and therefore Sharia, Islam will never promote Christianity. It can't. It cannot promote it any more than Christianity would promote Islam or Buddhism or anything else, in that Islam sees itself as salvifically exclusive, right? That we believe that the way to worship God and the way to go to heaven, so to speak, is through the path of Islam and not through the path of Christianity. And so we believe in exclusiveness of that. And so we could never promote Christianity because, of course, one of the tenets of Christianity is Christology, or this idea of Christ being divine, at least in most dominant forms of Christianity. Well, that is untenable for us as Muslims who believe that only God is divine, only God is worthy of worship, whom that we, as well as Christian Arabs, refer to as Allah in the Arabic language. So we could never promote Christianity, but it should never be misunderstood that in light of Islam and Muslims not wanting to promote Christianity, that means that we are vehemently opposed to Christianity to such an extent that it has no place existing in the world and including in the Muslim world. One, history simply just doesn't bear this out, obviously, that there are large swaths in the past in which Christians lived amongst Muslims, even amongst Muslims when they were in political rule, and they were allowed to practice their religion. The books of fiqh, right, the books of Islamic jurisprudence are, replete with chapters discussing exactly this topic of how to accommodate worship of the people of the book, as we obviously what we refer to as the Jews and the Christians. And so, to me, when I see all of this outrage about they're making a mockery, and it's like, yeah, the people that you thought were your allies, because you were supporting them. You were supporting France when it wanted to ban Sharia, which is stupid. There is no Sharia in France. When it wanted to ban the hijab, when it wanted to ban halal, including also kosher, slaughter, when it basically wanted to push Islam to the periphery and make no place for it in its society, you gleefully cheered on the French. And then ironically now, when that rabid dog has decided to turn around and bite your hand, now you suddenly act, how could they possibly do this? Well, number one, it is the French after all. I don't know if American conservative Christians really know who the French are, the various philosophical and cultural revolutions that have spawned and come out of France, but they tend to not look favorably upon religion very highly. And you couple that with a very, very strident form of Eurocentric thinking, it's no surprise. And so, in some ways, I can say I have very little sympathy for conservative Christians, and I'm highlighting those and separating them from others. I have very little sympathy for conservative Christians who are griping now and complaining and lamenting about how they have been made a mockery in front of the world stage, as if they are not worthy of that, or they are beyond that, or perhaps you thought you were better friends, right? Perhaps you thought you were better. You should maybe choose your friends more wisely. And so, yeah, it's interesting to also watch some of the red-pilled Muslims who have thought that they could find a cozy partnership with American conservatism simply because of, their views on gays or our views on gays, or their views on abortion are our views on abortion, which actually for the latter, not really so. And so it's interesting to watch some of the red-pilled Muslims. What do you do in this situation? And so I've seen there's an attempt to say, well, there's the passage towards the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, towards the end of the 5th chapter in the Quran, where Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, alayhi salatu salam, when Jesus, the son of Mary, is approached by the disciples, by the Hawariyun, and they say, Hal yastati', can your Lord yunazzilu alayna ma'ida min as-sama? Can he send down a banquet table of food from the sky? And so, there's been some discussion. Well, see, that's just like the Last Supper. Of course, there's some details about the Last Supper that we would, probably disagree with. But this inclination to want to find commonality with a group of people that up until this moment were more than happy to cheer on the French in their unrelentant assault upon Islam and Muslims in their country. It's only now that they feel this great sense of outrage that such a thing could possibly happen to them, who they're just these, they're completely innocent. So hopefully maybe out of this moment, probably unlikely, but maybe out of this moment there would come the ability for, as one of my teachers, Dr. Sherman Jackson, would call the corporate structure of religion, right? That at the end of the day, we're all going to advocate for our own beliefs. So I'm only going to advocate for Islam, and a rabbi is only going to advocate for Judaism, and a priest is only going to advocate for Catholicism or Christianity. But how do we deal with the way that space is made and accommodated for in the public space, and we have to go beyond simply the talking point of freedom of speech. For one, freedom of speech is certainly not one of the 10 commandments, and it's not also something in Islam where we feel that a person has the right to say things that are repugnant. So obviously we would take a completely different view on this. But putting that aside, you can't champion for things like First Amendment rights and freedom of speech, and then when somebody comes along, now you have to accept the fact that if that is what you believe in, then at some point you're going to be on the other end of that stick, and that the only recourse you have is simply to make your rebuttals or make your case, or provide a better alternative of which people will be more inclined to accept your truths versus that. But yeah, I have very little sympathy for how this has played out, because to be honest, it just really shows how blinded conservative American Christians are. That if they really think that Islam is some actual existential threat to their existence, meanwhile, we have this situation here of during the Olympics, a major moment on the world stage when Christianity in particular would be mocked. If you think we are your enemy, then you in some ways you deserve this kind of treatment because of your just blind hatred. And I'm not saying that as a conservative or conservative, non-conservative Christian. I'm not saying that Islam is something that you have to like, that you have to esteem, that you have to agree with. Obviously, if you're committed to the tenets of Christianity, then you would not any more than I would in the reverse agree with Christianity. But I get no joy in seeing Christianity abused in the public sphere. I get no joy in Christians maybe having rights taken away from them. So hopefully, maybe this would be a learning moment for that community. I kind of get the feeling that doesn't happen much anymore, especially with their new Messiah candidate that they're all voting for. That's another example of the irony that, the characterization, right? The character that Trump played in his first election, which is running as this sort of, populist candidate, that he was going to drain the swamp, and he was somebody that was going to stand against the both of the parties, against the mainstream Democrat and mainstream Republican, that somehow he was going to be somebody who's going to come in and shake it up. Well, clearly in the sequel to his presidency, he has, even simply by the picking of Vance as his vice president and what he represents, coming out of the venture capitalist world, coming out of the he has very much moved from being anti-establishment to a pro-establishment president. He ran on this whole thing about not getting the vaccine. Then he flipped with Operation Warp Speed and was pro-jab, and yet the people, the MAGA people, seem to be, particularly the conservative Christian group, are blinded by him and are not able to see him for what he is, and will undoubtedly vote for him in droves, even though he is going to very much stand in the very opposite of what they believe in. You cannot be America first, and you're going to work with venture capitalism, slowly privatizing aspects of the CIA and the American military-industrial complex to further wars in other parts of the world. That's definitely not putting America first, and that's certainly not going to bring back any manufacturing jobs to America and so on. And so, yes, there's a real blind spot to American conservative American Christianity. So anyway, it's late and I don't want to ramble too much, but yeah. The irony of watching this take place on the world stage. Hopefully, maybe they'll learn from their lessons. We'll see, inshallah.